Morning, morning, morning. Top of the morning, everybody. Jerry Hanley here from Viking Performance Training with my good friend Jonathan Pishner of Apex Campling. Apex Health. And together we are the Asymmetric Habits Podcast. So today's topic is on the habits of neurological expenditure. And this is probably also, by the way, one of our like fancier sounding titles. I really dig it. I know JP's excited about this topic big time, though. We know this one can help a lot of people. And the general synopsis is, we're used to things taking a certain amount of energy, but most people, when they think about it, almost always tend to think about like physical tiredness, even though we all experience like mental tiredness, mental burnout, brain fog, all these things, which can be signs that things take more mental energy than we have at the moment or have been prepared to spend on it and give to it. What JP is talking about bringing this up when he brought this topic up, again, this is a JP special, is how you can actually strategically like attack certain like new habits based on the amount of energy they're likely to actually take to implement and get started, and for them to make it much more successful, like for new habits to stick and to build them and pretty much improve from that point on. uh, Before I keep going, and who knows what I confuse, I want to actually pass it on to JP himself. That says I know what he wanted to talk about this for a while.
Well, yeah, and I didn't realize how transformative me learning about this topic was going to be for my clients. Because I started learning about it in relation to some basics of traumatic brain injury and some chronic difficulties like post concussion syndrome and those kind of things, in service of helping people who had that happening. And then once I started learning some of this stuff, I started realizing, oh no, this is for everybody. Everybody should know this. It just happens to be desperately necessary for populations with brain injury stuff, but it's so ridiculously helpful for everybody else that we had to talk about it. So, and I'll go ahead and skip ahead to how people will probably likely use this that are listening to this. Most likely what the information is going to end up with is going to be, wow, you need to actually do a reduction of some of the things you're doing because you're way over expending your neurological energy before we can even talk about habit change. So to paint a picture of where a lot of people are before we start getting into specifics of what to use here, most people dramatically overspend their neurological energy. And that can be from simple things like not getting enough sleep, to much more complicated things and just arranging tasks that are too neurologically expensive. And there's many of them that are not obviously neurologically expensive. So let's take a minute and talk about what those things are. And I'll kind of, there's pieces of this where the brain science is like becoming clear, and there's pieces of it that are based on some educated guesswork. So I'll also do my best to kind of like draw where the lines are. Like, here's what we know, and here's what is assumed, but maybe not clearly known. But here's the short version. Everything we do expends neurological energy with a few exceptions. Like sleep doesn't generally, but almost everything else we do expends different amounts of neurological energy. How much kind of depends on the person, and it depends on their own specific brain and their emotionality and their interests, but a few trends. The more cognitively difficult a task is, the more neurological energy it expends. The more we switch tasks, the more neurological energy that expends. This is going to be important later.
That's huge.
Yeah. The more we experience context changes, even if there's not a task switch, the more neurological energy is expended. The more, I'm going to go with micro expenditures as a term. The more micro expenditures we have, the more we can accidentally overspend neurological energy without thinking about it. Like, a candy bar functionally costs nothing on most people's budgets, but you buy enough of them and suddenly you're overspending a great deal of money. So there's some of the small things that we're going to hit on But before I just continue rambling, like let me kind of also paint a picture of this is a difficult to solve problem in modern America. Most people listening to this, if they make a commitment to solving this problem, it's going to take them several months or a couple of years of experimentation. But for my clients and myself, because after I discovered how transformative this was going to be, I started doubling down on it. Most of the people who do this end up being in a far better place mentally, emotionally, productivity, focus. Like there's tons of benefits, but the upfront commitment is this is a long-term fix. There's not going to be a cool like, aha, here's your one tiny habit that is going to instantly fix things. It's really, here's a bunch of tiny habits to look at, and if you make it through a stack of them, you're going to get huge benefits on the back end, but you're not going to get a ton up front.
This is what I would consider a leverage move. Like when really improving this is, it's just going to give you so much of a multiplier, like on the changes you make. And because for the listeners, like we're talking about the neurological expenditure, is that everything I said, like you've been saying, like we've been saying, like takes this energy, and it's a new concept for a lot of people to grasp. I think, and I said, like, is like we've mentioned it in previous podcasts before. When you make decisions or not, but just simply when you're even thinking about it, that is taking actual mental energy, and there is a finite amount of that. It's not endless. When we go through emotional states or when they change, same thing. Like that takes emotional mental energy. And like these are real things on the body. These are real things your brain and nervous system are experiencing. And it does start like it does function better when it's fresh, and starts to slow down and function worse, or maybe even eventually almost not function at all, like when it's just like way too tired. But we've been so trained, especially here in America, or the like Western societies built in the same way. We've been so trained to think that if it's mental, it's something we can push through. Like physically, like some people like that physically too, but especially mentally. It's like, oh, I just need to think harder. I just need to like keep going, not give up. Like we just think that, if we can't focus on something, that the solution is going harder, going longer. It's not really taught or even talked about a lot of times to think of it as an actual energy expenditure, like it's with its own gas tank, basically, that we need to like take care of and recharge, but also just learn ways to get better mileage out of it. And that's really what this is going to do. It's like, I would almost say, this is one of those things that like most people, everybody has experienced when these things are kind of clicking. And it's my thought that improving these habits over time will give you that clicking experience more often. Like when you seem really like, when you seem just on point, like you're super productive, you're super focused, you're able to knock things out, things you struggled with maybe to work out in your mind earlier, all of a sudden are super clear. These are all signs of how well your brain and your body can work. And when you really like improve this, like we are talking about, these habits that will lead to better neurological usage, you'll actually find out that those things are happening much more frequently and better.
Yeah. So let's get into some usable principles. Basic principle number one: if you do not pay attention to this, your default mode will always be to overexpend your neurological energy, at least in the society we presently live in. Like if we experience a dramatic societal structure change, that might change. But the society we presently live in, if you do not pay attention to this, you will absolutely tend towards overspending your neurological energy. And I want to tell a couple of stories just from little things that people might be familiar with. So I don't know, 5-10 years ago, this kind of circulated around the internet and made its rounds. I guess during an interview or something, somehow the information came out that the reason Mark Zuckerberg always wears the same outfit is because so he doesn't have to decide what clothes to wear, and he conserves that. I don't think he used the term neurological energy, but that's what we're talking about. But he conserved that, whatever he said it was. Um, on the surface, that sounds tiny, and that sounds possibly inconsequential or insignificant. As an indicator of a mindset, it's wonderful, because what that suggests is somebody who is aggressively defending their neurological energy and conserving it as much as humanly possible. Because if we expand that single idea to what are all of the micro habits a human can try and apply this to, there's going to be tons and tons and tons of them. From, like his thing of always wearing the same outfit, so there's not a decision to be made there. Eating the same thing every day. I mean, you can really go to crazy lengths on that, but it's not bad as far as this idea. Jeff Bezos in an interview said a similar thing. He said, as CEO, he views it as his job to make 3 high quality decisions a day, and that if he does that, he did his job for the day. Which I think is wonderful, because I've never been CEO of a big company, but if I use my imagination, I imagine I can probably come up with billions of work fidgets to do and to invent that I might get into and think were important. And when I heard him say that, and I was thinking through this lens, I was like, oh, okay, he's doing the same thing. He's kind of saying, all right, as soon as I make 3 decisions a day, I kind of declare victory. I declare myself done, and I try not to get into a bunch of other stuff. It's another good example of somebody aggressively defending their neurological energy. I doubt he's thinking about it in those terms, but that's what's happening. And I pick those 2 because they're relatively famous examples of the things or of people that you might be familiar with. But anyone can do this, and the reason I like those 2 examples is because they're 2 good examples of somebody doing this aggressively and not kind of half-hearted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great stories, and so a lot of times I think, I try to really a lot of times paint what I feel like most people, quote unquote, perceive with this stuff, and it doesn't help, how it's usually portrayed a lot. Because a lot of times I feel like, these stories come out, or these things are just, pop up on wherever, on social media, etc., and they're usually taken as like, oh, that's an eccentric rich person thing, or he's just weird. It's like something.
Yeah. Oh, look at the neurotic, person.
Neurotic. Yeah. Like,
and that could be, but it's still potentially useful.
Right, like that could have very well even led them to that type of thing. But I said it actually ends up, it ends up helping in a lot of different ways. And like the Jeff Bezos example, like I really like that one as a great example, because in like the business development circles out there, for example, there are like one fairly popular idea is about taking your tasks, and which ones are important, which ones aren't, which ones are bigger, which ones aren't. That's been around a few decades, got a few different names, but like whether this is a $10 task and this is $1,000 task, or this is important and urgent, this is not important, not urgent, different names.
Yeah, the Eisenhower matrix. Yeah.
Right. And really, it's like I said, it's taking a similar idea, but for us and how we function, how our brains function. It's like, yeah, like if you're the CEO of a company and you're instead focusing on creating, you have thousands of employees, and you're instead focusing on creating some new spreadsheets rather than like the next big thing that's going to really make the huge company better. You probably have people around who can do that role way easier and let you focus on the important part. It's a similar idea, even just as an individual for your own life. Like the more little random things you keep worrying about, or like thinking about those things, the less we have for ourselves to actually make those like bigger decisions or the more important things. So,
Right.
How often as a person, if there's, especially if there's a big decision that we are not necessarily so we really don't want to make it, or we're worried about making it, we're like, whether it's an obstacle, like loved one issue, big life change, or just something big like that. How common is it for all of us to feel like we suddenly are more interested in distractions?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and like, yeah,
that's
so
that's
go
key.
ahead. Yeah, like
Yeah,
so.
yeah, because when you get your neurological energy overexpended, that's when you lose focus, and it becomes difficult to stick with a more difficult task. Anything from a hard workout to doing going over the books or whatever important thing. That's a good signal of like low neurological energy is if you can't maintain your focus, you're overexpended.
Mhm. Like exactly. I think this type of thing is huge. So you said that was the first principle. If you don't pay attention to this, you will default to overexpenditure.
Yes.
What's your second principle?
Okay, so the second principle is that you can't ever fully optimize this, but you can do a lot to help yourself. What most people accidentally do, as I introduce this, is that they will imagine that there's a perfect formula instead of just trying things and seeing what happens.
Mhm.
So let's kind of cut to a few examples, because we already gave a couple of examples, just things people have tried and they seem to work for them. Zuckerberg does the whole I don't decide what clothes to wear, I just wear the same clothes every day. One of mine is, and ever since learning this, I've doubled down on it. I've kind of done this for a long time, but I aggressively avoid non-actionable news. And I've said this on this podcast a few times, I think. But the reason for that is because there's a neurological load that comes with information. I think we can agree on that. You put information into a computer, it uses up some of the memory. You put information into a person, it takes up some of the brain processing power. We eat gobs and gobs of useless, non-actionable information that we can do nothing with, but it still takes up processing power. And we do this for a number of different reasons, most of which are irrational. Every once in a while, there's a rational one. But information limitation is one that anybody can experiment with, whether it's news, whether it's like less social media. Like how many people go on social media sabbaticals or something, like take breaks from it? What they're doing is they're limiting their inputs. They're limiting their processing power being taken up by those inputs. So this is a nice one anybody can experiment with, is reduction of information intake. But there's many others. But the reason I'm going to not get into like dozens of examples and instead give a few with the principle is each person kind of has to figure out what's the thing that takes up some neurological load for me, and experiment with cutting it out. One of the reasons I start with cutting it out is because most people are way overdone. We can't add in neurological energy optimizers until we subtract some stuff, because a lot of people are way too overloaded anyway. We got to reduce the load in many cases before people can do this. And one of the reasons I say we got to reduce the load first is because many good habits that people want to develop are somewhat neurologically expensive. I'll give a good example before I get back to how to use this principle run. I teach people how to use their thoughts to control their feelings as part of my work, using the cognitive part of your brain to indirectly impact the emotional part of the brain. Very useful skill. Really, it should be taught in school. However, it is very neurologically expensive to do that. What most people accidentally envision, and this is how it relates to you'll never optimize this. What some people accidentally envision is they should be able to control every single one of their emotions through the pulling the lever of their thoughts. That's not possible just based off the neurological load that would take before we even get into any other considerations whatsoever. So it's good to know that you're never going to optimize this fully, but you can, through experimentation, figure a lot of stuff out and figure out a pretty good system for yourself. So that's the second principle, is just start experimenting with anything that seems like it's taking up a lot of neurological load and seeing what you can do to reduce it.
Let's say be aware too of how it lets you, of how things you hear or do like make you feel afterwards. Because if it's, stressed, worried, negative in any way, like those are also signs that it's taking up more so. I was laughing early. I could not help myself but start laughing because one, when you mentioned, the information cost, no matter what it is, I was directly called out on that. And it's just like I love my random tidbits of trivia, but it's one of those things where like they make me happy. Whereas if I'm reading political news, that's gonna set me off. It's like it's completely different.
Oh, dude, let's hover on that for a second because
Yeah.
this is perfect. How you can't optimize, but you can do a lot. So like that, you said it so perfect. I read this bit of trivia and it makes me happy. So you expend a little neurological energy on the intake, but you get an okay result on the back end. So neurologically, this is probably net positive and it's probably fine.
Awesome.
Whereas, let me read political news, which, I mean, the news site's basically designed to piss you off.
Yep.
So that's almost always a net negative and a dramatic net negative. So the one that's good, even though it takes a little neurological energy, it's okay to do because you're not going to make it so it expends zero energy. But since you get a net positive, you keep that one. I do the same thing. Like for reasons that are unclear to me, I love movie trivia. I love to know, this scene was shot this way behind the scenes because this happened.
I want to know all of it. Like I want to know what every actor's been in if I've seen them before. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny because the second part of that, people like the idea of a swear jar, right? And like at our house, Ashley has joked time and time again about creating an inconvenience fee where every time I share something with her, that she's like, I can't believe you just told me that. And it basically comes down a lot to like random trivia or things like that, where you're like, it's almost exactly that. It's like, would be like literally paying for taking up your neurological expenditure.
That's brilliant, and if y'all implement that, I love it. That's perfect.
I do want to at some point do that like for fun. One of those things, maybe put the money to something random because I will fill it up quickly. Oh, that's awesome. It's okay, and but okay. Do you have a third principle ready, or can I ask you a separate question?
Well, let me stick with this one for just a second with the experimentation. So and just point out a few areas where people should pay close attention. So like, and here's another one from me, and you and I have joked about how we differ on this, but now we'll talk about it in the context of this specific topic. You couldn't pay me to write down my workouts, whereas you love that level of planning. Spreadsheet stuff, I'm just going to call it spreadsheet stuff, is very neurologically expensive to me. When I walk into the gym to make my workout as easy as possible, I basically just make it up as I go. Now, I'm not training for a specific athletic performance, so I don't need to worry about setting those benchmarks. So I basically, what I do is I make my workout take up as little neurological energy as possible by eliminating aspects of it that are very, very expensive. And so I get a nice hard workout without having to accidentally overspend elsewhere. Whereas you like that kind of stuff and you're energized by it. So you don't have to eliminate that and worry about that. You might have to eliminate other spots in the workout. Of course, many lifters, especially people who lift heavy, will joke about how, like, don't do cardio for whatever X funny reason. But what they're really saying is cardio is neurologically expensive to a lot of people. And so they choose not to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. Either the discipline of it is neurologically expensive or the act itself. But a lot of people choose not to expend the energy there. and find that they get a better, I'm going to go with just blanket term, better workout in the sense that it's more enjoyable to them because they're not overexpending their neurological energy in that space because it's very expensive for them to make themselves do it. Matter of fact, discipline by itself is neurologically expensive. So anytime you're attempting to utilize the idea of discipline, know that you're expending a lot of neurological energy because you'll want to figure out how to recoup that somewhere because you cannot discipline yourself through every aspect of life or else you will run out. And maybe there's a few freaks out there who like have this endless pool of neurological energy to expend, but that's not 99.9% of people.
Now, with that, actually, when you mentioned that with discipline, like over time, that would be one of the parts about taking action, like and like voluntary discipline or focused discipline, and eventually having things become more habitual. That would decrease the risk, the cost of the neurological expenditure, right?
That's almost always correct. There's a few things that it's just hard to do no matter what, but yes, the more acclimated you become, usually the less neurological energy it expends. So if you can stick with it until you start getting that, that will help a great deal.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, the more like the something that takes a certain amount of energy, the more overexpended you become. Does it actually, would it be fair to say that things actually become more expensive at that point? Like these are arbitrary units, these things don't quote unquote exist, but
yet we'll figure it out one day, but yes, they don't exist yet.
Yeah. But like, something said takes 10 units of neurological expenditure, but you are in a period where you're over, like you've been expending too much, which a lot of times will feel like, tired, stressed, frazzled, depressed, you name it. Things like that. Something that cost 10 units before might cost 20 now, and even a higher cost.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a compounding effect to being low on neurological. Where I don't know if there's research done on this, so I'm giving you only my observation from the therapy room. But there would seem to be a compounding effect the longer you go without proper recovery or with too low neurological energy, the more compounding the effect gets for sure.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a couple times in the last 5 minutes about net positive effects. Yes, it's really good. So understand that we're saying is like, these are things that can actually help you replenish or at least keep going at a high level more often. And like, that was one of the questions I actually had up. For example, we were talking about the Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs wear the same outfit every day, or that type of thing. Now, in their cases, that helps them decrease decision making and save neurological expenditure that way. Would it be basically one ideal that they're trying to avoid is if you're the person who just is not sure what to wear, is trying to randomly figure it out, pick it up and go, that takes some neurological energy each day. But now, if you're the type of person though who you love outfits, you like your outfits, or even if you're not in that, but yeah, you put something together and you feel really good about it, how you look, that would in turn actually be a net positive result from the like making those decisions, right?
Yeah, and it depends on the person. They have to kind of weigh that within themselves. But yes, you're dead on. There are going to be some people who love that process and who love to either get dressed up or done up, and that energizes them. So even though they're expending energy, the net result, mood wise, emotion wise, enjoyment wise, is positive. So you keep that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so like the so one of the biggest things I'm getting here is like when it's like one big thing is permission. When you find processes that you really enjoy, like try take advantage of them and try if you can make them part of it. So especially that's so individual. So if you got someone else, like I feel like this would be a great relationship type thing, or even a workplace thing. Just anywhere there's like multiple people, networks working around. And if you got something that you really like, or just makes you feel good with that other people don't get, like, it's one of those things where the important part is that, like as long as it's not actually having an actual like negative effect or cost effect somewhere else, like do that thing that recharges you and gives you that net positive. And on their end, I mean, hopefully, like, or, if you're the person seeing it, again, as long as there's no actual negative somewhere else being caused by it, then otherwise, support it, even, like allow them to do those things, whatever. So if you're that guy, for example, who has a significant other who loves that process of getting ready in the morning or getting ready for a trip or something like that, as long as it's not, as long as it doesn't have an actual negative of say making you late to the airport, then
Yeah.
cool. Like support it, give them that time, let them get ready. Like just as an example.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point that we probably won't have time to get into today. But if couples can learn these things about each other and like kind of be, oh, okay, they need this for their neurological rejuvenation. Let me just step out of the way and let that happen. Then yeah, that's absolutely useful.
Awesome.
So, in the absence of anything that is universally net positive, let's talk about examples since we're sitting right on this anyway. Things that people can consider trying out to see if it's neurological net positive. Excuse me, there is one universal truth. Taking care of your physiological needs is absolutely important to neurological rejuvenation. If you are not sleeping properly, if you are short on sleep and you are denying yourself proper sleep, you are going to be experiencing neurological net negatives, and you should probably stop that immediately. Short term, you can get away with it, and sometimes that's necessary. I've pulled a few all-nighters for work or for college or whatever, but if that's the way you're living your life, the positive you probably should be working on is figure out how to get the amount of sleep your body actually needs. Some people are short sleepers and can actually get rested off of 4 hours, but most people need 6 to 10, depending on the person. So, but outside of the base physiological needs, there's not a lot of nuance to what neurologically energizes or rejuvenates people.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's if you're listening to this live or soon-ish now, like we're early in the holiday season, this like not only do we have Christmas coming up in about 3 weeks, but we have that's actually sooner than that, I think 2.5 weeks. But also got New Year and all the things that normally come with that. We have to realize like a lot of the things that we want to do, the people quote unquote people say they want to do when they want a habit change, like decisions like those take that energy, but especially when it's not what our body thinks it wants. Like try to make that like I'm thinking with food. I don't know why food suddenly came to mind, but when we eat a certain way, it's a very real thing that our body gets used to eating. That's like what we've been eating, and that's basically what it has in mind for cravings. So if you eat a lot of fast food, if you eat a lot of chips, if you drink a lot of sodas or sweet drinks, whatever, whenever you get hungry, those are the things your body craves. Whereas it doesn't crave healthy food when you've been eating junk. Like again, it's just that's not the brain like works with those sensors. When you eat healthier, you eat more whole food, that finally opens up the door for your body to crave those things and actually want those things when you're hungry. Like it actually starts thinking about them. So sticking with what our body wants is a lower energy cost. But that's where like if we want to make a positive change in a lot of like we have to like sometimes it is going to cost more energy for a while until like we talked about a few minutes earlier, until it finally becomes a little bit easier to handle, a little bit to do. Like this is one of the biggest things coming up with if you're in the New Year's resolution or simply okay, I'm going to improve things at the beginning of this year or whatever, but really just any habit change. Like I feel like eating like we talked like physiologically, exercising and like starting to exercise and starting to eat better are two of the biggest ones. And even though like those are net positives to our overall health and also like help mental clarity and things like that eventually, if you're not used to those things early on, it has a lot of neurological expenditure. There's a big energy cost because our body basically doesn't want to do it. And you have to like so there is, to a degree, some amount of like high energy expenditure that you have to take to make certain changes until you start getting more used to it.
That you might have to take, because even within that, there's things you can do to reduce the upfront cost. I'm thinking of of a specific person that has been in our weightlifting gym for like a year and a half. And I remember when he first started, all that happened was he came in and he like fiddled around with stuff and he left. And then he started doing more stuff and more stuff and more stuff until now, like, I don't even know this dude's name, honestly, but like, I know who he is because he comes in, I see him put in hard workouts now. If I put this in this lens, he continually ramped up the neurological load of his workouts as he was able to tolerate
awesome.
more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, for the person who's trying to start, and we've said this a dozen times before, just without this terminology, just getting like a behavioral approximation of the habit. So if you want to start working out, maybe it's not getting in the gym and doing like blasting out crazy hard workouts. Maybe it's starting with the habit of go to gym, do a thing, leave. Because neurologically, that's way less expenditure and you're not overshooting. As a matter of fact, let's talk about that for a second because this is important. And probably one of the most important things I learned as I was, kind of getting into all this stuff. Because we're used to overshooting on our capabilities and expecting it to do like muscles do. And I didn't realize that the muscles and nerves grow and change their capabilities in different ways. You can dramatically overshoot on your muscles capabilities and you will get benefit from that. Mm-hmm. If you dramatically overshoot on your neurology's capabilities, you get zero benefit whatsoever.
That's so true.
Yep. And that was transformative because I didn't know that. I was like, oh yeah, of course, if you just do it as hard as you can, you get some kind of benefit. And realistically, when it comes to the central nervous system, you expand its capability by going just up to the line without overshooting and then backing off. And then you go just up to the line and nudge it just a little bit further and back off. And that has been probably one of those useful pieces of information because now that I look back on numerous clients who had difficulties, I can see like, oh shoot, they were overshooting too far. We needed to like bring them right up to the edge and nudge it instead of letting them just go way too far over the line, because muscles will benefit that way. The nervous system's capabilities will not. And the thing that like if I had a moment to highlight this in this entire episode, it would be this, because most people don't realize that there is no benefit to dramatically overshooting on your nervous system's capabilities. And we see this enshrined in a lot of things. We see this enshrined in things like medical school and law school. Like, these two things are absolute mental and emotional meat grinders.
I gotta say that is just school now, because
yeah,
you look at the last 20 years, and all they keep doing is wanting students to do more and more and more work. Like, right. So that's one place where if things could be improved there, it would be a tremendous benefit. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. But all it's doing is reducing their neurological resources and just making things worse. But so you'll see that there. You'll see it in people's work. Like usually the reward for getting work done is more work, and it causes people to get overloaded and dramatically overshoot their nervous system's capabilities. And because most people don't know this, I mean, shoot, I bought into this myth forever. If we then start wearing out and getting burned out and getting run down, we think we're the ones screwing up. Mm-hmm. Instead of knowing that, like, oh, the system I'm in is dramatically overtaxing my nervous system capabilities. I either need to figure out how to be different within this system or get the hell out of this system. Because and God, how many times have I looked at somebody in here in the counseling room and told them, you've reached the peak of your mental health if you choose to stay in this environment. We cannot expand your mental health capabilities any further in the present environment you're in because it just overtaxes the nervous system too much.
Yeah, like the nervous system is in charge of like everything. What's funny is when you say that, I mean, not funny, but like it actually made me think that, yeah, like the people who have figured that out a long time ago were like, if any, like explosive sports coaches are like were like for decades the only coaches out there in the sporting world who seem to understand that concept and were not overtraining their athletes.
And that's actually where a significant portion of my information comes from, because the realm of psychology has not caught up. There is a desperate need for the field of psychology to be examining this, because I mean, yeah, there's a little bit out there, but you're absolutely right. If you look up this information, you will find mostly this coming from high level performance coaches in the sports world.
It's crazy. So actually, I want to go, stick to the guy you mentioned at the gym who started just showing up, kind of doing some stuff, and progressively worked harder. It's such a great example, and really with this, going back to like the actual like trying to make new habits to improve these things is the value of going one step at a time. Like one step at a time. And like you mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that happens a lot or things that cost a lot more energy are both complexity and task switch. And both those things kind of come into play when trying to create like brand new habits or that you want to include in your life. Like I said, using health and fitness as some of them. Said so often people fizzle out going to the gym because, just like you said, they go in. There's two big reasons. I'll tell you, like, one is they go in with no idea what to do. And that's a higher professional case. Like they have no clue what to do. They even feel embarrassed or they don't know. So then they're like, after just a little bit of time, they're like, whatever, and let it go. Or they go way too hard. You see this more often in the I used to work out crowd. They go in way too hard. Like I said, then they like can't handle it, burn themselves out, too sore. Like I said, nervous system is frazzled.
I've never been guilty of that.
All their decisions, and they're like, all right, screw this. But nutrition's the other one. Is people want to lose weight, or people want to eat healthier, they want to improve their blood markers, And again, if you have a typical American diet, there are dozens of changes you can make that will all improve like your overall diet. You don't have to make all 47 plus of them at once. And that's what so many people do. They want to go straight to that perfect diet. They want to go straight to that new calorie level. Baby steps, easier to handle, and I said way less neurologically intensive. It might just be, might like cut one food out or drink more water. It's like, start with those steps. There's so much value in just making those small changes and letting them and getting used to them. Do it. And such a big part of it is because of how much energy it either takes or doesn't take anymore.
Yeah. Since you brought it back up, one of the things I want to point out is how people will screw this up. Because I'll just go ahead and tell you, as soon as we say, hey, try and guard your neurological energy a little more clearly, here's how you're going to screw this up if you're the average person. I'm trying to remember. Do you happen to remember the name? There's a name for it where like somebody works 45 minutes and then takes 15 minutes off and works 45 minutes. That has a name, but I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I don't know the name.
Yeah. Okay. So here's way number one that people are going to screw this up. Is they'll come up with this idea and they might even select that system or something similar, like, oh, okay, I'm having trouble focusing. It's time for me to like take a break and take a breather for 5 or 10 minutes. All right. Psychology pop quiz. You take a break for 5 or 10 minutes. What do people do? Right there. Yep. Exactly. And let me share with you why this is going to not be a good neurological habit. So I'm opening up my Instagram, and I'm going to look and see what the first 10 things in my feed is. Let's see. So that one's funny. That is a stand-up comedian, but he's talking politics, so mixed. That's politics. This is advertising. This is funny. This is martial arts stuff. Here's some workout stuff. So in the space of, that was probably about 10, 15 seconds, I went through at least 6 context changes. How many context changes can I get through in 5 minutes?
Yeah, hundreds.
Probably. The first few aren't too bad. You do that for very long, though, and it is tremendously draining on the neurological system. So when you're taking a break, you think you're taking a break, you're actually selecting a behavior, if you're the average American, that is actually just as taxing, if not more taxing, than the work you were just doing. Mm-hmm. So here's where experimentation starts to become important, because number one, you've got to put this thing down. And then number two, most people are suddenly completely lost as to, oh, how do I take breaks without my phone? Do I take a walk? Do I meditate? Do I make a cup of tea? Do I read a book? And for a lot of people, what will actually have to happen is they'll have to experiment. What does a 10-minute break look like without going to social media? And which of these things provide me the closest to being net positive on my nervous system? It might be as simple as just going and talking with a coworker for a minute and, joking with them about something. It might be taking a walk around the block. It could be doing a little bit of exercise. But most people will actually have to do a surprising amount of experimentation to figure out what is a neurological net positive just for taking a break before we get any more complicated than that. So I say this to highlight that we're proposing something that sounds simple, like, conserve your neurological energy, do things that are net positive, make sure you don't overexpend. But the amount of commitment required to actually make this work, even in its most basic form, is very high. And so I want to give people a lot of permission to suck at this when you start. Because if you envision that you're going to somehow be good at this, you're probably not. I mean, hell, I wasn't very good at it, and I'm playing with cheat codes on because I have been in the psychology field for a decade and a half and went to school twice for it. I'm playing with cheat codes on, and it was hard. So most people who ain't got the game genie attached to themselves are going to have an awful lot of difficulty. So I say all of this because I want people to experiment with this and work on it. And I also want them to go in eyes wide open, knowing this is actually going to be tremendously difficult to start. And so just try a bunch of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can add anything to that. That's pretty solid.
Well, let's do this, because this is an important one, and it's okay for us to spend a little extra time. You usually ask good questions, because I have a tendency to like ramble all the thoughts in my head, but you often have good questions. Let's figure out what are some things I've missed that would be really valuable to help, because I want this to be maximally usable to people. Because if I had to highlight top 10 most important things we've talked about, this would easily be in the top 10, and it may very well be in the top 3.
Well, I think one of the things we could actually spend a little bit more time on is that task switch too. Like you mentioned, the context change.
Oh yeah.
I think complexity for the most part speaks to itself as well, just the bigger it is. But task switch, especially because we're in such a society where multitasking is a thing, and we've talked about that before as it is. But yeah, people don't realize that how much either just switching from one to the other. There is like I mentioned earlier about as discipline builds up or things like that, or you allow things to become better, like better habits, that that energy cost does start to drop, the neurological expenditure of it, and momentum is similar to that as well. is part of it. Like, especially if you're like getting into it, like the flow, quote unquote. Like, so often if we're working on something, but then you're trying to switch back and forth. So the switch, but the way what happens in your body to go from doing this, like, okay, I'm working on this sheet, this spreadsheet. Okay, I got a few minutes. Let me get to these emails now. Let me go back to this. Let me tell this person over here something. Like, all those brain switches do take they're little spikes in your energy expenditure each time that happens. Like, when you get to focus on just one task, whether it's work related or not, but when you get to focus on just one task, it gets gets to streamline a little bit. Or like at home, if you're at home or you're a stay-at-home parent, something like that, similar idea. Like, you're doing the dishes, you're doing the laundry, or are you doing dishes and laundry and cooking and coming up with this? Like, that takes a lot. Like, no wonder, like, if you're working at home, but that's the type, like, it makes complete sense to you, you're exhausted.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. So yes, task switching can be expensive. You can mitigate it. However, let me encourage you to not believe you're going to do that immediately for the people who are just starting on this concept. But I'll paint a picture of where this can end up, because you can mitigate the task switching expenditure an awful lot, because you can basically roll 3 tasks into one task, so it's functionally not a switch. Let me kind of paint a picture here, and then let's do that home tasks thing, because there's probably a lot of parents that listen to this, so this would be great. Okay, so we got to cook dinner, and we got to do laundry, and we've got to, I don't know, clean the kitchen as we go, as we cook. And also we've got to somehow figure out how to keep an eye on the kid while all of that's happening. Okay. On the front end, it is going to be difficult to not have a great deal of task energy expenditure, because you're in the kitchen, you're cooking, everybody knows that, like, oh, I haven't heard the kid for 5 minutes. What in the hell are they doing? I better go check. A lot of parents are familiar with that idea. So then I've got to go check, task switch, back to the kitchen. Okay, there's this. Okay, I've got 5 minutes. I can throw the laundry in, task switch. Okay, laundry done, back to the kitchen to get the thing off the boil, task switch. Switch. With a lot of experimentation, you can have this all rolled into one big task where it's kind of, let's just call it the midday process, for lack of a sexier term, where if you get good at that dance, all right, I put the thing on, I know that the next step of my midday task is load laundry. Okay, now the next step of the midday task is go make sure the kid is where I put them. Look around the corner. Okay, they're still fine. Next step of the midday task is next step of the meal. Laundry buzzer goes off. Next step. And when you get used to that dance, just like any sort of physical pattern, there's no energy expenditure, because you're not functionally changing a lot. It's all one big part of the pattern. But most people envision they should be able to do that instantly. That is something that comes with massive amounts of practice and massive amounts of front-end effort expended to get there. I mean, it's kind of like learning dance moves, athletic moves, anything. Like, if you took me and said, here, you're going to learn how to play football. Well, I've watched a lot of football, but I can't throw a spiral. I can't catch a football very effectively. I mean, I'm big. I might be able to, like, hit somebody, but I don't know how to hit somebody in the correct football way, because I'll probably do it illegally. Now, once somebody has learned all of that dance, it's all ingrained. It's all very easy. But on the front end, how long would it take to teach me the dance of football? I mean, bare minimum 6 months, probably a hell of a lot longer than that. So that's a place where people can end up on the task thing. But what people do to themselves is they envision they should be there instantly, instead of slowly building that ability over time. That's when task switching becomes way less energy expensive.
I saw two things in that. Like one is the beauty of momentum. Like I love momentum. I love momentum. That's part of it, I think. But and that made me realize, like, let me know if there's a name for this, because I know I've heard something like this before, where things are. There's something about things that seem easier, or just less energy intensive, if they're done in, if they're seen as less units. That is like, just like you mentioned. I mean, you even used a word like one unit, like you said, like washing dishes, doing laundry, cleaning, taking care of kid. Like you said, all those things. If you try to do each of those things as think of them separately rather than as just one big thing, it just it's easier to keep going. It's like, to me, so much of that is like it is a momentum thing. Like, just, I don't even mean like you have to keep moving, but when you've established like an interplay from one, like a network across the things, it just makes the keep going like easier. Like I know for me, for example, I know like I have a 30-minute commute, which and in that 30-minute drive, like especially if it's going home, I can pretty much these days count that I am not going to get started on anything different like home when I'm home, unless it's recharging, because like just stopping whatever I might be have been working on like here at work, stopping like for 30 minutes and going on over there, it's no longer the same unit. I no longer have any of the same momentum. And this is one of the things I want you to go into, is starting again is so hard at that point. Like, it's far enough in my day where I spent a lot of my neurological expenditure at that point. I spent a lot of that energy. So starting something again is much harder. Whereas if there was something that I had to do, it would have been better for me to to like even stay back a little bit and just continue in the process until I'm done and then finish, rather than try to like stop, go home or whatever, and try to start back up again.
Yeah, that's a good example of certainly an inefficient neurological expenditure. If you did need to continue the work, going home to do it could be too expensive, and it sounds like for you it is. Um, so to the idea of momentum, yes, most of the time, and basic physics, an object in motion will tend to more easily stay in motion. To a certain extent, our brains are like that as far as neurological expenditure. Now there is a threshold that after you cross it, it doesn't matter how much momentum you had, you're just done, and that's just it, and it's pointless to continue. But yes, if you have momentum, instead of doing a location or context change, and you need to continue the work, maintaining the momentum is probably more efficient. But again, this is wonderful fodder for experimentation, because you might have some people who have the opposite. Because I'm in the same boat as you, but let's say that what is being neurologically expensive to me is not the work itself, but loneliness. I feel very lonely, and that's what's being neurologically expensive to me in this moment, and is making it hard to work. If I pack up my computer and go home and continue my work at the kitchen table where my loving family is now near me, maybe I'm doing the right thing, because maybe now I'm in a better neurological position to continue that work, because the thing that was being so expensive to me is eliminated. But this re-highlights the necessity of personal experimentation, because on the surface, it sounds like you're right. But if we engage in lazy thinking and don't kind of look at what is the thing that's being neurologically expensive in the first place, we might miss the key unlock there, which is no, get around people, then continue the work.
And that goes right into the other thing that I was actually, the next thing I was going to go to was in the individual experimentation part. Don't overlook the power of finding atmospheres that fit for you too. Again, of course,
God, yes.
The things you can control. Obviously you can't control everything, but if you can, like I said, like the atmosphere that you're around will have such a huge impact on the things you're doing. Like, I mean, for example, like a nice sunny day. If whatever you're working on, or just whatever you're doing at some point in time, if it can be done outside and you have the capacity to just, go outside and do it when it's a beautiful day out, that will just kind of uplift everything and again give you a more positive, like a more net positive on the energy expenditure from that. Like let's say
Mhm.
it's folding laundry. Okay, rote task, takes a while. It seems like it never ends. There's all those pieces to it, but like the cost of maybe like always doing it, say in your living room, sitting on the couch, or if it's a really nice day and you like that type of thing, and you can go out just on the back porch and fold some laundry out there. That again, that can be a little bit of a boost.
Mhm.
Or something you can control a little bit more, but again, like if it fits, is music. The power of having good like music that you like, like just music that gets you going at different points in time. I feel like drastically changes the energy cost of things, or like either the energy cost or just what you get out of it.
Mhm.
Like it actually reminded me of something we talked about. I mean, like years ago, just I think just randomly, but where I mentioned where one of the like when I'm in my some of my deepest work periods or focus periods to get stuff done. One of my favorite go tos is I go back to a lot of like classic video game music from when I was a kid and playing, and I'll just find like either the whole soundtrack or key parts that just are like on loop, and I remember that, and like how you actually mentioned how a lot of those soundtracks, they're designed to have an effect that just keeps people like not paying attention to it and just kind of draws people in and keeps going.
Mhm. And let me highlight the importance of what you're saying. One of the easiest ways to manipulate your neurological energy is through the music you listen to, because it's accessible to everybody. It's largely free or low cost to do so, and you can most people kind of know if they want to feel a certain way. What should I listen to? If I wanted to feel more sad than I'm feeling, what would I listen to? If I wanted to feel happy, if I wanted to feel energized, if I wanted to feel angry. Uh, and here's a good key unlock that it took me kind of a while to figure out for my own self, in case it's useful for anybody else. My workout music changes. My work at the office music changes, uh, and it doesn't remain the same. So like when I go work out, uh, I will sometimes listen to like last night I was listening to Windrose, which is dwarven metal. Last week I was listening to Gangnam Style on repeat. Why? I don't know. Just that's what energized me that day.
Oh,
Um, the day before or the week before that, I remember there was one day where I was listening to like late '90s, early 2000s pop, like a lot of like Britney Spears and stuff like that. Why does mine change? I don't know, but I kind of, once again, personal experimentation, figured out like, oh, this boosts my neurological energy if I swap out high energy music for different types of high energy music. So making sure that you continually, because I mean, I came across this idea years ago, and you can tell I'm still experimenting. Uh, but yeah, music is a perfect one as a low cost, easy to use, and highly impactful to manipulating your neurological energy positively.
hmm and going in the other extreme of similar decisions, but again, almost as a permission, it's this. I mean, this. Of course, for if you have the means in the options at some point in time or opportunity becomes available, this could be a great reason someday to like move to where you want to go. I feel like when moving, like people have where they want to go. Like some people have where they want to go, but also a lot of people have reasons for why they don't want to or why they think they shouldn't. And this could be it, especially if it's going to change that. Like if you're a sunny disposition person and you're in like Michigan, northern Michigan, maybe you're like, okay, like I'm definitely not functioning at my best for 5 months out of the year. And again, like you try other things and maybe someday you have an opportunity to go south. Maybe that could be it. or a rainy climate to dry climate. Again, like that's a super low percentage of the people I'm talking about, and of course, high thing. But again, just mentioning that again, like a possible benefit may not simply be a change in location, but just that overall change in your, like the real change in your atmosphere from the location could have a drastic impact.
Well, and actually, that's higher impact, and that's way more people than you would initially believe, because it's sometimes surprising to me the problems I treat based on what I thought I was going to be treating. When I work with couples, the number of times that we end up addressing that the couple moved here and this particular location is neurologically difficult for one of those persons.
Yeah.
I treat that way more often than I would have imagined that I do. Now, back to kind of like, you can do a lot to control your emotions, but one of the things I have to help couples get in touch with is that, hey, for this partner, it's actually very neurologically expensive to live here, where it's neurologically cheap for you to live here. So, and helping them get in touch with that compassion, like, hey, your partner actually struggles with this. And so you've actually got to be ready for them to be a little different than they were in that previous location that was much more neurologically cheap for them. And now it's more expensive, and they're expending a ton of resources just like not hating it here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely have known several couples through the years, like with that exact situation.
Yeah, I would have never guessed how often I would treat that until I became a couples counselor, and I was like, oh my gosh, this happens way more often than I would have thought. And until you know about like things like this, you would not make up that it might be neurologically expensive to live in a particular place if it doesn't fit well with you.
But actually, to take that, and one of these things to point out again to people that they may not realize or might think of as a mistake, like if it doesn't go perfectly, is again, remember that when you make these decisions, just because you've made the decision doesn't mean that the neurological effect of that decision is over. Like, it's not just done. Like, you didn't just make a decision. Like, it might be like when you pick the candy bar or something like that, and like, okay, you bought the candy bar, you eat it at some point, you're dead. Like, that's done. Something like that. But a lot of other decisions, like just because like it could be this big, like, okay, we decided to move here or to like there, that doesn't mean like, okay, the decision is done. There could be like, okay, that neurological cost to just handling the decision, or the other side of it, for the rest of your life, or for a very long time, or for the rest of that moment being there. Like it's like it's not just done because you made the decision and did it. There are a lot of things you had like are just constant reminders.
Well, let me use I'm just going to make up a term, but it fits nicely here, because what you're talking about is the idea that neurological cost can compound over time.
Yeah, and it's like maintenance. There's a neurological cost to maintaining.
Yeah, well, but in this case, like, let's say, and I'm going to use a very specific example because it's one of the most important things related to this, and it's the thing that got me learning about it in the first place. But if let's say you can be okay with something for a day, like, and we'll go with the environment. Let's say you can be cool with living in Morgantown, West Virginia for a day, and you can be cool with it for a week. If it takes a certain amount of neurological resources to be okay with it for 6 months, the next 6 months, it's probably going to take more neurological resources to be okay with it if it's overshooting too much. Remember how we said there's a threshold. If it's starting to stretch your ability too far, like, it can actually take more resources and more resources and more resources. There's certain things that do this. And the thing that does it the most, by far the most, and I'm going to use this as a moment to tell people a problem to solve to help themselves a lot. Pain. Pain is one of the most neurologically expensive things you can experience, especially chronic pain. And that does seem to dramatically compound over time in terms of the neurological expense. I don't know if there's studies about that, But certainly, as far as just like anecdotally from the therapy room, the more people I see with chronic pain, the more I'm absolutely convinced that if you are not working to try and solve chronic pain problems, if they're solvable, sometimes they're not, then you're probably expending your resources incorrectly. Because the amount of psychological expense that comes with chronic pain is so high that it becomes difficult to use your resources for anything else. So, like, obviously, I teach things like emotion control, I teach things like relationship skills. All of these things have a certain neurological cost. Well, for somebody who has chronic pain, they have way less resources available at the start than other people. And one of the things I've found is I have to really intelligently sequence what they do, because some of my best tools might be too expensive for them. That they might not have the neurological resources available because of the pain. And so I've got to like give them tools that they can actually deploy that maybe aren't the best ones, but it's the best ones that they have the resources available to handle. So all of that to say, if you are experiencing solvable pain in any way, you would probably be best served, if you're going to try and do what we're talking about, throw as much time, energy, money, and resources into solving that as you can if you want to be able to utilize this concept long term.
That's huge. I mean, it really made me think too. You see this a lot of times. Unfortunately, it might be you, but I feel like this is something that you see more often than you probably internally identify. Or you probably identify this in other people easier than you identify it in yourself. There we go. But it's when someone is like basically at that type of threshold, whether it is from pain or just different stresses that are basically taking so much of their neurological power that they can't have it, to where in essence personality seems to, if not change, but just get like cranky, angry, like, just something like that, because they can't handle much more.
Sure.
Like I said, like it could be you, and you might notice. I mean, you definitely like will notice, but I feel like we're more attuned to thinking like about other people on our end. We think it's more temporary. It'll just pass. Just whatever. But yeah, like when you're pretty much spent, that doesn't come out in just how we feel, but in how we're acting to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah,
that's absolutely true. Because if you just put two concepts together, it makes it work perfectly. Because if we put together the concept of it's hard to be happy when you're in pain, and the concept of you can control your emotions, but it's sometimes neurologically expensive. Well, there's three concepts. And the concept of pain is also neurologically expensive. Yeah, you put those three things together, of course somebody is going to be more angry, sad, or some other negative emotion, because they just they're not living in a natural state that is going to move towards happiness, and they don't have the neurological resources available to move themselves to it through like sheer force of will.
All right, brother. Is there anything else you really want to hit on this?
Given time,
more we can talk about.
yeah, I was going to say, given time, I'm sure there's 3 hours more of stuff. But for now, as far as like being digestible and usable, that's probably good enough. But let me re-hit a couple of the high points. So, knowing that your neurological resources are finite is absolutely key. Experimenting with how best to optimize them is going to be important. Knowing that you cannot fully optimize them into some perfect way is desperately important, because it's important that as you experiment, you have permission to just get things wrong, guess wrong, be imperfect. Knowing that any sort of like making this tool work is going to take a long time and require a lot of commitment and effort is going to be key. And then knowing the few things that are absolutely always going to be neurologically expensive, so you can avoid those as much as possible. Eating too much information, too many context changes, too many task changes, pain, wrong environments. There's probably a dozen of those that would be important to mention that I'm just not thinking of right now. So if you know that stuff, you can reconstruct a lot of useful ideas. But if you're going to use this, just commit to it taking a while. But the benefits on the back end are absolutely staggeringly good if you could just hang in there and work on figuring this out.
Yeah. So much information in this episode. And yeah, I think there's definitely a part 2 coming of this, like in the not so distant future. So again,
yeah, matter of fact, like let's even say, if we get comments or stuff on this with questions, we may even include them in a part 2 because
that's great.
Like that would probably be good.
Absolutely. So again, so thanks everybody for listening. Again, like take this. This can definitely be a listen to this on a couple different times to really get it down. That's because there's a lot of information here, but like I said, with huge implications. I said, like without the nervous system, I mean, we really cannot do much of anything. And if we really want to get the best out of our decisions and out of our actions and what we do, I mean, finding ways to just just work with our nervous system to make it work the best that it can, it's really going to have a huge, huge payoff.
And I should say special thanks to Dr. Nick Kyle for introducing me to this rabbit hole before I just jumped in head first, because he's where I found out I was missing some information, and then I dove in and flew as far as I could.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. So, all right, everybody. So, Asymmetric Habits podcast, it can be found on Spotify podcast and Apple Podcasts as well. So, check it out. If you like it, share it, subscribe, leave a review. And we will be back here in a couple weeks. This episode will be published on the podcast as the next new one. All right. Catch you guys later.
See y'all.